Hello friends, good morning. My name is Akash Sanjay Khobragade. I am PhD scholar at Delhi University and coordinator at Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge. Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge is founded by Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara sir, and his idea behind this institution to provide an academic space to scholars, professor and doctor who are engaged in the field of studies and many more. Today, Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge is going to have its 32nd of lecture, and this lecture is a part of a series on 14th of April 2025 on the occasion of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Jayanti. And for today's session, Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara sir, our institute founder, going to chair the session. And I take that to welcome and introduce him. So first, Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara sir is former Vice Chancellor and founder of Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge. He is the author of the History of Dalit Identity and the book and is Modernization of Buddhism. After completing his from JNU, New Delhi, Dr. Karunyakara as assistant professor in Ambedkar Studies, Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Central University, Lucknow. He introduced the Dalit History course in MA History program. He was also instrumental in the introducing 50% reservation for SC/ST students in BBAU admissions. He founded Ambedkar University's Dalit Student Union in 2000 and Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar Central University SC/ST Teachers Association in 2006. He is joined as director professor in Babasaheb Ambedkar Sidhu Karan Murmu Dalit and Tribal Studies at Mahatma Gandhi Hindu Vishwavidyalaya. He held post of Dean and Dean School of Literature, former Vice Chancellor of the University. And I welcome Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara sir for today's session. Now I request Ms. Suhas Kamlakar to please welcome and introduce our today's guest.
Yes, good morning, very good morning, everyone. My name is Suhas Kamlakar. I'm a PhD scholar from Jamia Islamia. So I take a pleasure to introduce today's guest. So Professor V.M. Ravi Kumar is a head of department from history. Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar Central University. He has specialization in modern India history with special reference to environmental history, economic history, and Dalit studies from ecological perspective. He has also published some books which are as follows: edited books, which are two. One monograph also there is one monograph. The number of papers published in journal by him is 70. The papers published in edited books is 20, and the number of papers presented in national and international conferences is 65. He has also delivered number of public lectures, which are 25, and he has also supervised MPhil students. The number of supervision is 8, and PhD. And he has also supervised PhD, awarded some PhD which are under his supervision, which is 12. And today's topic for the lecture is Indian economic history from Ambedkarite perspective. So we immensely welcome you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Suhas. Thank you, Ms. Suhas. Professor Ravi Kumar sir going to deliver his today's lecture, and we are going to have his third lecture, and we are very much always we are get very much enriched by his lecture. And today's lecture, the topic is Ambedkar Village, the Ambedkar and Village, a theoretical reflections. So I request Professor Ravi Kumar sir to please deliver.
Hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay, as usual, thank you very much for generous introduction. And at the outset, I would like to profusely thank my mentor, Professor Karunyakara, and I also amused really to see the kind of determination he has to carry forward the series of lectures. And the interesting part is that I'm sure this lecture series will become one of the classics so far as Dalit studies is concerned. Therefore, at the outset, I would like to congratulate Professor Karunyakara and his team, very dedicated team, for making this lecture series possible. With this small appreciation, let me go into my usual business. As Akash suggested rightly, my topic is Ambedkar and Village, a theoretical reflection. For your convenience, let me spell out. My presentation will have four broad conceptual sections. In the section number one, I'll speak about why we need to revisit, reformulate Ambedkar studies. I believe in very strongly. I justify in the section number one. And then in the section number two, I will speak about existing theoretical formulations. Rather, to make it very simple, I'll review briefly how the connection between Ambedkar and village has been constructed by existing literature right now, till now. And then I will also like to highlight some of the problems in that existing literature. And then in the section number three, I will focus on how we can reformulate Ambedkar's ideas on villages. I have my own material. I'll be using that material to justify my argument. In section number four, I will have some broad generalizations. Hopefully, Akash, I'll have around 35 to 40 minutes, isn't it?
Yes, sir. You can take around 1 hour also, not an issue for us.
Okay, thank you very much. And then now let me start with my section number one. I think following Stuart Hall happens to be one of the very important cultural theoretician coming from UK, and he's a founder chairman of Birmingham School of Cultural Studies, very popular thinker. Now, Stuart Hall observes very interesting theoretical necessary. That is, any thinker's ideas, philosophies, and then their formulations need to be reformulated consistently. And we need to reformulate the thinkers and their philosophy because, in order to align their ideas in tune with the contemporary conditions, challenges, and prospects, and then problems. Therefore, I think we need to reformulate Ambedkar's ideas in tune with the kind of challenges that are coming up nowadays. Therefore, taking inspiration from Stuart Hall, I would like to convey a message that, Ambedkar has been drawn into larger macro level emancipatory philosophical perspective. In a very simple story that, Ambedkar ideas actually formulate a trajectory of emancipation. But then I feel that is very important. Having due regard to that, what I feel, what is now more important is we have to get back to micro level analysis of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Because Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, as we know, is almost like a treasury of different kind of ideas. Okay. Therefore, see, for example, I can tell you that Ambedkar has wonderful ideas about people science. Ambedkar has wonderful ideas about racial segregation. He has ideas about history, and he has wonderful ideas about many aspects of Indian society. Therefore, what I feel, the scholars who are working on Ambedkar studies, instead of focusing on macro level emancipatory trajectory, which has already been explored to a large extent, they should get down to micro level studies. For example, his ideas on education, his ideas on many other things, because I think that is a more apt, more important, and more pertinent nowadays, because We are encountering rapid, sometimes uncomfortable changes. Now, I think, the marginalized section, they have to handle new challenges. So those new challenges should also reflect into the ideas of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Therefore, I strongly suggest that scholars who are working on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar should get back to micro level analysis of his idea. This is the starting point of my lecture. What I did in order to justify my position, I have taken Ambedkar's single idea on how he has dwelt with the idea of village. Now, how Ambedkar's ideas on village have been constructed by subsequent scholars, and then what kind of a problem exists in those construction. This is what my topic is all about, theoretical reflection. So let me now move to my section number 2, where I will speak about the way in which Ambedkar's ideas were constructed and given to us so far as his ideas on villages are concerned. I think we have formidable literature, very exciting literature on economic thought of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Starting from Abraham has written wonderful paper in EPW, and we also have Sukadev Singh Thorat. We have so many books written by Thorat, Balchandra Mungekar, and then we also have L.C. Malaya, and then many Vishwanath. So I cannot give you so many people, but then these are the stalwarts who have worked on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar from economic perspective. Now, the problem with the classical studies on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar economic thought is something they mostly focus on his ideas on economic history, his ideas on public finance, his ideas on Indian currency. Therefore, and then let me tell you, by taking this opportunity, Ambedkar, while writing about economics, you can see that is most of his. There are 5 important texts written by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and when he was writing about economics, he was not directly writing about caste. That is for sure. Whether it is a provincial finance, whether it is a problem of rupee, whether it is East India Company public finance, you take up any kind of economic text written by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he is somehow not very comfortable inserting caste-based discrimination into his writings, probably because disciplinary ethics, probably because he was approaching economic history, economic thought from academic foundational aspects. That's why he was not inserting his emotions into his writing. That's the reason why, my dear audience, you can see very clearly there is a clear distinction between what Ambedkar writes about economic aspects of India and what Ambedkar writes about social aspects of India. A very clear hiatus, you can see that. So that is the reason why most of the studies on economic thought of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, they actually suffer from conceptual foundations, because they were forcefully enjoining his economic thought with a social thought. Of course, they try to connect that. So therefore, what I feel that in existing studies on economic thought of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, they subscribe to macro level analysis rather than micro level analysis. Okay, that's one point I would like to highlight with due regards to the scholarship of all those scholars. They have done commendable and tremendous work. I appreciate their work. Of course, they have that lacuna. And then secondly, in the last 10 years, probably, I could say 20 years, some studies attempted to locate Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's ideas on villages. Okay, starting from Gail Omrit, of course, she did not directly refer to his ideas on village, But Surendra Singh Jodka, I think you are all aware of him. Jodka was the first important theoretician, I would say that. He's a phenomenal scholar. He has published a small piece on a comparative study of Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Nehru and their ideas on village. I think it was published in 2001 in Economic and Political Weekly. Now, Surendra Singh Jodka compares all these thinkers and their ideas on village. Thereby, somehow Surendra Singh Jodka convinced that Ambedkar harbors acute negative feelings towards villages. He doesn't like villages. And then the source Surendra Singh Jodka uses very interesting. He uses his annihilation of caste. Of course, he also refers to his constitutional speech, okay, and other ideas where Ambedkar was not really comfortable with village system because Ambedkar strongly believed, in fact, truly, that villages are some kind of space where caste system was practiced, and village was a place where Dalits were treated as untouchables, and village was a space where we have so-called orthodox Hindu social order oppressed most of the. This is what Ambedkar feels. And this is a picture given to us, not Ambedkar feels. Ambedkar, of course, he has his own ideas. He disliked villages, but we have to see, subsequently I will clarify, we have to see from what context Ambedkar was writing about Indian villages. This is what very important. So Jodka's formulation was Ambedkar, on contrast to Gandhi, Ambedkar never ever appreciated village life. Rather, he wanted to move away from most of the Dalits from villages to towns. This is what we were told. It was followed by another wonderful paper written, not paper, lecture in Jawaharlal Nehru University given by Jugje, a professor from Punjab University. The title is very interesting, Ambedkar, Village and Manu. And this work also says Ambedkar's intense dislike for villages, and then highlight that the reason why Ambedkar did not like that. Okay, and it is followed by another very path-breaking work by Ravi Kumar, again from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and his paper published from Edinburgh. Now, this paper also mentions about Ambedkar disliking about caste and then villages. And then recently you have a Latin American scholar, Kejaria, has come up again with a book that Ambedkar did not like. See, I need not to give you, it's a little boring. We have many other works. Sufficient this is. 80% of the studies on Ambedkar and villages, they profoundly, in fact, very clearly mentions about three important points. I would like to sum up. Point number one, this study says on account of his anti-caste ideology, on account of his commitment for emancipatory ideology, Ambedkar did not appreciate the space of village. Because Ambedkar strongly believes the space, the spital configuration of the village is all about oppression, exclusion, marginalization, okay, and then so on and so forth. Therefore, ultimately result into dehumanization. That's what So therefore, this existing scholarship establishes the fact that, on contrast to Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar never ever liked village as a space, as a cultural unit, as a religious unit, ultimately as a geographical entity. That's number one. And number two, these studies also highlight that Ambedkar perceives village as a classic unit of caste practice. Because, look, we have to understand that, Mahatma Gandhi idealizes village as a specimen of the best specimen of Indian culture, the Hindu culture, and Ambedkar takes a contrary position, and he highlights that Indian village is this is what the existing studies tell us. And Indian villages are the best specimen for caste practices, dehumanization practices. Thereby, villages should be abandoned. This is what, existing studies ask us to believe. These are the ideas of Dr. Ambedkar. And finally, third important point, the existing studies also says that Ambedkar imagined, in fact, Ambedkar exhibits some kind of bias towards urban centers. And then all these studies, they quote B.R. Ambedkar's Small Holdings in India. It's a very popular paper. Now, the small holdings in India, Ambedkar mentions one very clear point. The point was somewhere the labor from the villages need to be shifted from villages to urban centers, because urban centers offer better employment opportunities. At the same time, urban centers also provide a kind of better space for away from the caste system. So this is what he did not use the word caste system in the paper, but then that is implied. So that paper has been quoted by existing studies that Ambedkar disliked villages, and thereby Ambedkar was visualizing urban India. Ambedkar was not really focusing much about villages, something like that. Okay. So my dear friends, in the section number 2, I tried my level best to convey a simple message to all who are listeners. The message is: existing literature on Ambedkar and villages clearly establishes Ambedkar's dislike for Indian village system, and then clearly establishes the fact that Ambedkar was for urbanization, modernization. But as a person who has been working on Ambedkar for some time, I feel this theory has some problems, serious problems. And because of this kind of very regimented theory, we were unable to understand what kind of emotions, what kind of ideas Ambedkar harbors in his mind about the villages. Because this is very important for us. Because the fact is, India lives in villages. And then 90% of the Dalits live in villages, even during Ambedkar time, even now also. Therefore, is it that Ambedkar is a partisan towards urban areas? Is it that Ambedkar does not have very clear programmatic policy for rural areas? Is it that Ambedkar was very strongly advocating that Dalits should abandon villages and then move towards urban centers? These are the questions I think we should ask. And these questions, somehow, the existing literature did not deal adequately. That's what I have a problem. So, in order to answer all these questions, in fact, it can be a beautiful book. In fact, I will come up with this. Now, how Ambedkar negotiate and visualizes about Indian villages. In other words, what kind of, connection, totality we can see in the thought, practice, and vision of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar insofar as village emancipation is concerned. Now, let me now move on to my section number 3, which is a major section where I will try to put forward my justification for my critique on existing studies. Okay. My premise, what I propose in this lecture is that Ambedkar's life, mission, and ambition, vision, has well-defined program for village emancipation. And he has a well-defined, I can say that, programmatic vision, how village areas should be prospering, how village areas should be developed. on how village areas should be modernized. This is what I propose, and then I will go on justifying my claim, and I'm subjected to be corrected. I think you can also critique me, but then these are all, I think, some of the very important uh, ideas of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, I believe in, needs some kind of, a serious introspection. For me, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's ideas on villages should be seen from a historical context. What is historical context? I suggest you people to refer to a beautiful book written by Sumit Guha. Sumit Guha's book is Environment and Ethnicity in the Western India, where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar comes from. And Sumit Guha also written 2-3 books subsequently. One is, Caste in Indian Society. And recently, Sumit Guha also published a book, Ecology and Empire, where he talks about village system in India. Okay. Now, what Sumit Guha formulates, that village system in India is not ancient as it was believed conventionally by Gandhi and many other people. In fact, he comes up with a research that, village system was strongly established by the British Raj. Now, how? Sumit Guha says, your Raitwari system, Zamindari system, Mahalwari system, and even in tribal areas, we have many other systems. Right from 1800 to 1900, there is a 1 century. Sumit Guha tells us that it is a British which had created most of the villages in India. Because it is a British who has established big dams, they have constructed canal network, and most of the barren lands were brought under agriculture. When agriculture was expanding in India, along with agriculture, we also have expansion of village settlements, that is called villages. Okay. So therefore, Indian villages were not ancient as it was visualized by Mahatma Gandhi, as it was visualized by many other thinkers in the modern India. Rather, they were all, kind of very dynamic process. Ruralization was a very dynamic process which was, created by the British. Therefore, Ambedkar, when he was, formulating his own ideas, he knows the fact that in villages were created by the British, most of the villages. At the same time, in most of the villages created by the British, it is a dominant castes who have occupied most of the land. And when dominant castes occupy most of the land, and most of the Dalits and other marginalized sections, they were incorporated into village space as a subordinate partners, which means that the community which controls the land, it controls everything, including a culture, including religion, including. Therefore, Ambedkar dislike starts from that village. Okay, this is what I think we have to understand. It's not that Ambedkar was hating villages because of something else, but Ambedkar knows that villages were the space where land was grabbed by most of the upper caste. And then because of the land ownership, they were able to perpetuate untouchability. They were able to control other marginalized sections. Okay, that's the starting point. We have to understand Ambedkar was operating from the historical context. Okay. Nevertheless, I have some points to prove my hypothesis. Okay. Hypothesis number 1. To make it very simple, I propose that Ambedkar did not dislike the way it was conveyed to us about the village, knowing the fact that majority of the untouchable community live in village. Therefore, right from the beginning, Ambedkar has certain ideas for rural developments. Of course, he did not like the space, but at the same time, he did not reject them completely. Not like that. He said, well, it's a desirable that population from villages should move out, but at the same time, it is equally desirable that the villages should be untouchable communities who are living in village should develop. And then what to be done in order to develop them. This is what Ambedkar was thinking. He was not rejecting villages completely. Rather, he was trying to formulate his own schemes, his own visions in order to develop the material and mental conditions of the villages in India. Now, let me come down to my justificatory points. Point number one, trend number one I would like to highlight is that land distribution. Somehow, existing studies on Ambedkar, they speak about land distribution as a macro level process, but then Ambedkar direct ideas on land distribution did not receive the adequate attention in the existing literature. Okay, of course, it was addressed, as I mentioned, by Ravi Kumar from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Recently, there is another paper published by Patel, A.K. Patel. These two papers address directly about how Ambedkar visualized land distribution policy. Now, let me give some empirical details. I think in 1924, for the first time, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, in Bombay Legislative Council, he openly requested Bombay Presidency government that forest lands should be distributed to untouchable communities. This is the first difference I come across where Ambedkar pleads the government, the British, that Dalits are suffering due to lack of access to land. Therefore, Dalit communities should be given some kind of land. He was referring to ownership. He knows that ownership of the land is a passport to progress in Indian society. Therefore, Ambedkar in 1924, for the first time, he has come up with some kind of plan. The plan was something like this. See, in each and every village, you have forest lands. And those forest land, Ambedkar proposed that those lands which are in good condition, they shall be allocated to untouchable communities so that they can have access to land. This is the first difference I come across where Ambedkar forcefully argued for land distribution, which means that Ambedkar having a kind of plan, a kind of vision that even rural Dalits should also be given some kind of autonomy, some kind of provision. This is what he was contemplating. Okay. And that apart, in fact, I have written a paper. Ambedkar consistently advocated for land distribution to Dalits. And I tell you some interesting facts. In a depressed caste conferences, they were held in different parts of Maharashtra. In each and every conference, whenever Dr. B.R. Ambedkar attended, he always consistently advocated the point. The point is wastelands, forest lands, banjar lands, and unclaimed lands, they all should be distributed to untouchable communities. No, that is a very consistent demand Ambedkar was making. In fact, whenever there is a public gathering, whenever he addresses untouchable communities, he used to say that land access is very, very important. And then that land access shall be provided by the government itself, because therefore he was advocating and he was mobilizing his followers, sensitizing his followers that we should always demand access to land. Therefore, no, this was happening, my dear students and other friends. This was happening even before the left movement in India took its roots. So therefore, it's not the left which was demanding land distribution. It's not Communist Party of India which was demanding land distribution. It was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar who was consistently, forcefully, and vocally demanding Dalits, each and every Dalit family shall be given some kind of ownership over the land. Because ownership over the land, Ambedkar strongly believed that it gives them justice, it gives them respect, it gives them security. This is what he uses in a word. Security is very important in rural areas. So the first point I would like to mention, not only that, let me also give you some interesting details. Ambedkar highlights that wherever there is a new land brought under cultivation, he advocates untouchable communities should leave their villages and go and settle there. And so much so that Ambedkar was also mentioning Dalits should leave to South Africa, because in South Africa there is a massive land available. And he also highlight that Dalits should go to Baroda, where Maharaja of Baroda was willing to provide some lands to Dalits. So therefore, I think it's sufficient for us in the discussion. Ambedkar was clearly occupied, in fact, obsessed with land to Dalits. Now, this has to come out really, land to Dalit. And he was not only obsessed, but he was also clearly articulating, clearly demanding. In fact, he was lobbying the British and trying to convince the British officers that wastelands, Banjar land shall be allocated to Dalit community, untouchable community. And then the occupation, the obsession of Ambedkar for land to Dalit can be explained by a very interesting concept, which I would like to highlight in this presentation. A concept which has not dwelt adequately by existing scholarship. The concept is there is something called separate settlements. I think perhaps those who are working on Dr. Ambedkar, they know this. I think for the first time in 1944, when Ambedkar wrote a memorandum to a cabinet mission, in that cabinet mission, Ambedkar demanded safeguards for Dalits. Okay. And besides education, besides legislature, there are many things submitted by Dr. Ambedkar. But one thing Ambedkar allocated almost more than one page was the issue of land. And apart from the issue of the land, he has also proposed separate village settlements shall be created by the British. Separate village settlements, what Dr. Ambedkar refers to, is like the way British has created Raitwari, Jamindari villages. He says Constitution of India shall have a commission, separate commission, known as Settlement Commission. Now that commission should create Dalit villages. This is what separate settlements all about. He says, see, in the Constitution, the commission shall be given the power, and he also suggests that commission shall be given separate finance. So thereby, Ambedkar was clearly visualizing villages should be developed. Now, how village should be developed? He was proposing by British government, independent India should create a separate settlement for Dalits, where a separate village exists exclusively for Dalits. This is what he's saying, suggesting. Because he said, see, if there is no possibility for Dalits to get good life in the dominant caste village, therefore he was pitching for a separate village settlements for exclusively Dalits. Now, this was a wonderful idea. I don't know why existing scholarship did not take it up. And then in 1944, he submitted it to the cabinet committee. And then from then onwards, you can see again a very consistent demand being made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on separate settlements. Now let me analyze the characteristics of separate settlement as visualized by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Separate settlement refers to a geographical area to be created by the government. In that geographical area, only untouchable communities were allowed to be there. Now that settlement shall have cultivable land. That settlement will have irrigation systems, educational systems, and all other necessary requirements like other villages. Therefore, Ambedkar was visualizing a separate villages for untouchables because he thought only those villages are free from practice of untouchability. And only those villages are capable of developing, elevating with the full potential. Therefore, that's a scheme submitted to Cabinet Committee. And then after 1 year, which means in 1945, the All India Scheduled Caste Federation, we are all aware of that. Now, All India Scheduled Caste Federation has its manifesto, constitution. In the All India Scheduled Caste Federation manifesto, and again, All India Scheduled Caste Federation has submitted its memorandum to Shimla Agreement. Okay. Now, All India Scheduled Caste Memorandum, again drafted by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, that memorandum again has more than 1 page about separate settlements. So he was pursuing this policy consistently. This is what I'm trying to tell you. And then separate settlements is nothing but his vision for rural development for Dalits, from Dalit perspective. Not only that, even up until 1947, when Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was inducted into constitutional body, and he was consistently pursuing his vision. The separate settlement should be created. But then for different reasons, and then well known to us, this scheme was not taken up very seriously into the constitutional debates. It was subsided. Okay. But then Dr. B.R. Ambedkar did not lose the hope. This is what I'm saying. Even you can see his writings again on separate settlements, which I referred to, right from 1950s. So from 1950 till he dies, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was consistently referring. In fact, he calls this as a new life movement. He has used the word new life movement. New life movement means Dalits should be allowed to have the new life within the newly founded rural agrarian system that is called permanent settlements. Okay. So therefore, I think this point is very clear. What my point is, Ambedkar, of course, he disliked villages, but at the same time, he has well-defined program for development of villages in his own mind. That's one point I would like to highlight. And apart from that, second point I would like to highlight. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was equally aware cattle, and then in several places, we can see that Ambedkar was referring to development of cattle, and he was equally aware of cattle needs grazing. And then villages need irrigation system. So he was consistently maintaining all those things. And in fact, he went to the extent of saying that villages should be taught how to create manure from, cow dung and buffalo dung. Okay. So therefore, these are all some of the things, I will come back to that. And he was also mentioning that each and every village shall have water. But Ambedkar, but I have written 1 or 2 papers on that. Ambedkar was fighting against water untouchability in rural areas. Okay, and he highlights how village common sources forbidden for Dalits. So therefore, that's a different one. So he has a vision for manure. He has a vision for grazing. He has a vision for water, and he has a vision for even many other things which are critically required for rural development. So the point I would like to highlight here is that apart from the land, Ambedkar was equally contemplating certain important aspects with which villages should be carried forward, and then how villages and the condition of Dalit should be developed. So this is one thing. Second important evidence I would like to highlight in support of my argument here is that the vision of development for villages contemplated by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. I would like to draw your attention to Independent Labour Party Manifesto, again drafted by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in 1934, I suppose. It was published in a volume 17 of collected works of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. You can go through that. That's available. In fact, volume 17, issue 2, volume 17 of collected works of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, divided into two parts. I think part number 1 has very interesting writings of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on institutions. His Independent Labour Party Manifesto has 2 points, very interesting points for rural development. Okay, I would like to mention those 2 points. Point number 1. Independent Labour Party and Ambedkar highlights there is something called rural modernization. He uses the word. Now, how rural modernization should be actualized? The manifesto says, on par with urban centers, on par with these towns, villages should also develop. How? Ambedkar says, number 1, there's something called village infrastructure. Ambedkar uses the concept village infrastructure, and he says village infrastructure includes roads and then sanitation conditions, everything. They should be developed, and then adequate funds should be allocated for all the development of village infrastructure. That's number 1. Number 2, Ambedkar was look at his radical vision for rural development. He also says, until and unless villagers' outlook is changed, no change is possible. Now, how to change the traditional orthodox outlook of villagers into modern outlook? This is what Ambedkar has very interesting observations. Ambedkar believes that villages are underdeveloped not because they want underdevelopment, because they were not modernized enough. They're not taught what is the best suitable life for them. So, Independent Labour Party formulates rural modernization scheme in which it says each and every village shall have library. And then that for Ambedkar, rural libraries should be taken up on priority basis, because, and then not only that, that rural libraries should act as a kind of educational instruction hubs. Maybe he was visualizing adult education, probably. That was not very clearly mentioned. But one thing is very clear, Ambedkar wanted villagers, especially Dalits, they should modernize their attitude, their outlook, as well as their thinking process. That's one thing. And secondly, further radicalizing his idea, Ambedkar formulates villages in India, they should have access to mass media. Mass media means not necessarily radio. He was contemplating they should have access to the best of, even at the time Bollywood, Hollywood was coming up. So he was visualizing villagers' outlook should be modernized. That outlook modernization only possible when they have access to latest developments, cultural developments that were taking place in urban centers. Okay. Therefore, this is what Ambedkar was visualizing. Not only rural infrastructure, but also rural mindset should also change. This is what Ambedkar was formalizing, and then consistently in his even Republican Party of India, Scheduled Caste Federation, wherever he was, Bhaishut Bharat, all the political outfits where Ambedkar was actively engaged, all those outfits were also dealing with this kind of rural modernization. I think existing literature badly missed this point because the existing literature was rushing, I think, determined to project Ambedkar as a messiah of urbanism, and then he doesn't like ruralism. It's not, he was sandwiched between urbanism and ruralism. He was made as ambassador of urbanism, and then he was somehow existing literature tell us he didn't like rural areas. Well, that's not the case. This is what I'm trying to prove here. Okay, and then one more important point I would like to highlight here in support of my argument, that there is something called rural infrastructure, and then Ambedkar was also contemplating that modernization of agriculture. This is a very important component. We have to understand how Ambedkar was visualizing changes in rural areas. Now, modernization of agriculture for Ambedkar, again, very consistent demand. It's not that he only wrote one paper on problem of small holding. From then onwards, if you just go through these volumes, time and again, it comes back to agricultural modernization. Now, what agricultural modernization refers to? For Ambedkar, agricultural modernization refers to, number one, efficient use of land, obviously, and efficient distribution of land. This is what very important. Ambedkar was contemplating land distribution, as I already mentioned. Okay, that's one thing. Secondly, Ambedkar was also formulating the best possible fertilizer policy. This is what you have to understand. Ambedkar was equally aware what were the best possible fertilizer, chemical or natural, with which you can increase the productivity. Okay, and apart from that, Ambedkar was also formulating marketing strategy, agriculture marketing strategy. He believes that agriculture marketing was somehow excessively dominated by upper caste. Therefore, he was contemplating cooperative societies and then induction of many Dalits into cooperative societies so that agriculture marketing can be democratized. I think by all means, these are the empirical details I have to support my theoretical formulations about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And thereby, in my last section, I would like to draw some broad generalizations about how we can reformulate Ambedkarite thought in line with the modern contemporary developments. Okay. Having given you all these empirical details, I think generalization number one we can draw is Ambedkar did not maintain well-defined distinction between rural and urban areas because he was acutely aware, so far as demographic details are concerned, untouchable population mostly located not in urban centers, rather in the rural areas. So if their population is located in rural areas, Ambedkar was very much aware rural areas should be given highest priority. Of course, he has a liking for urban centers, but at the same time, as an intellectual, as an activist, as a person who connected with eradication of untouchability, annihilation of caste with his emotion, he knows that until and unless rural areas are developed, the issue of untouchability would not go. Therefore, my first theoretical submission is that we have to shed our urban bias for Dr. B.R. Ambedkar because we always highlight his attire, we always highlight his English, we always highlight his many other things. But then, while doing so, we in fact forget his deep commitment to the rural areas. So therefore, first generalization I am trying to draw here, if we want to address the question of annihilation of caste, if we want to address the question of emancipation of untouchables or Dalits, it's very important for us to relook at the way Ambedkar was visualizing about rural development. Okay, this is one first important generalization. And then second generalization, again, I would like to, having located Ambedkar into rural studies, Ambedkar was very much into rural asset generation process. Rural asset generation process means, see, each and every individual in villages, their life is not possible. Their life is, cannot be developed without having access to some kind of assets. The reason why even the contemporary times, most of the Dalit communities and other Majlis communities, they're not actually developing the way they should have been because they don't have productive assets. Because, see, education, you can have education and then you can have a job, you can have, that's a different one. That's a trajectory which is a privilege to very few people, isn't it? Reservations provide jobs to very few people. But on the other hand, majority of the people, they have to live into the rural areas. When majority of the people, the two most poor people living in rural areas, what to be done to them? I think somehow Dalit discourse in the contemporary India, it should shed its urban bias and equally focus on how one should demand assets creation, generation into the rural areas. The idea of asset generation we have to take from Dr. Ambedkar, whether in terms of land, whether in terms of collective resources, whether in terms of many other avenues. These avenues are very important. What Dr. Ambedkar visualizing long back, if you don't provide these avenues, you cannot develop majority of the Dalit communities. Therefore, this is second generalization. We have to locate Ambedkar into rural setting and then you have to highlight his own idea. That's second generalization. The third generalization I would like to propose here is that emancipation, liberation, development, progress, they're not compartments. They're totalities. You have to understand. We have to look at emancipation as a totality. Totality means some kind of conceptual idea where each and every one should fit in. The Ambedkar conception of emancipation, Ambedkar conception of totality, what I believe in is something, it's not that it was designed for development of only educated people. In fact, if you remember in 1955, in one of the interviews to Times of India, Ambedkar lamented. He felt really bad. I should have done more to my rural brethren. This is what Ambedkar laments throughout the last phase of his life. I have done many to urban people, but then rural people, I could not do much. Given a chance, I would like to do more to the rural people. That's the reason why in 1955, he again submits a kind of letter to authorities saying that permanent settlements he suggested in 1944, again he brings it back. And then this time he comes up with a very interesting proposal. He says land distribution should be done to Dalits. The land government should purchase by reimposing salt tax on the rich people. Look at the radical vision he has, of course, we have to understand that. Now, he was, by making equity as a principle, he was suggesting Doesn't matter, you impose more tax and salt to the rich and collect money from the tax, use that money for purchase of lands in rural areas and distribute those lands among the Dalit families. See, this is a radical vision Dr. B. R. Ambedkar offered. This is nothing but rural asset creation. If you don't address this rural asset creation, somehow I think, and I believe in, we are trapped into the domain that Dalit emancipation is only possible when you have access to education and get a government job. And then, I think we have to rethink about it, because it's very important for us to see to what extent even rural areas should be developed. And then it's not Ambedkar never dumped rural areas, rather Ambedkar has his own vision that rural areas should be developed. Because, nowadays the government sector is now dwindling, there is no job creation. So when there is no job creation, you should also focus, you have to reformulate Dr. B. R. Ambedkar ideas and then adjust those ideas in tune with the contemporary development. That's what I'm suggesting. Okay. Last but not least, my theoretical formulation may have problem. It sounds like I'm making some sweeping generalizations. Of course, generalization, I have my own empirical details. Empirical details means now it's a time I believe in very strongly. It's time for us to reinvent rural Ambedkar. It's time for us to reinvent Ambedkar thought in tune with the rural. I'm not saying we should go back to village. Again, don't mistaken me. I'm not suggesting you have to idealize village life. Again, with the qualifications. What I do suggest is that since majority of the people, it's not possible in a stretch that all people from rural areas to migrate to the cities. It did not happen in 70 years, we know that. It may take several years, but how many people should die in the villages? Therefore, it's a time for us to think about Ambedkar ideas on rural village, and then it's very useful in order to make Ambedkarism more relevant to the contemporary times. I think I'm done. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. I would be happy to answer if any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ravi Kumar, sir. Usually, what we read till now, the Dr. Ambedkar and his critique on the village, but the another side which you and your critique on the present contemporary writings who are telling us or who was writing about how Dr. Ambedkar is criticizing only village. But you give us a new paradigm to see how Dr. Ambedkar is more interested to village development is very new for me, and I'm really thanks for him for this, for giving us a new understandable approach. So now I request Professor Karunyakara sir to please give his key remarks. Professor Karunyakara sir. In morning, he told me that he is facing some technical issue. So that's why might be he's not able. Oh, he is here.
Oh, yes. Yes, Akash. Yeah, Professor Ravi, it's a very pleasure to have you. This is your third lecture. You are always with us. Thank you very much for this kind cooperation to the KIDK. Thank you, Professor Ravi.
Thank you, Professor Karunyakara. He is actually having a technical issue from morning in his network. That's why. So now I open this forum for question answer session. So those who want to ask a question, please go ahead. Yeah, please, Sashikant Sambodhi. I've seen you have. Go ahead.
Sir Javin, sir, it is a very wonderful lecture. Sir, a query in my mind arises when you speak about the equal distribution has to be done by government like that to distribute the agricultural land to all the communities. Actually, sir, in the paper, in the small holdings in India, Babasaheb Ambedkar described the system that actually we have a culture in our society, in Indian society. We transfer our property, land property, to our children's, and this is generational thing. And he arises a question: ki, why don't we have a big holdings like that in Europe and America? Uh, and then he talk about that the Chakbandi thing will also not work for this thing, because this is go on, and will go on. Sir, how we will understand to tackle this problem to have a very big land to produce agriculture in India? Because sir, he said he didn't give a proper answer to this question. Yes, sir.
Shishikant, got your point. In fact, Ambedkar himself clarified this point. It's not
Yeah,
me. Ambedkar himself clarified this point, saying that it's not his intention to demand distribution of land from X to Y. Okay, because that's not feasible in a country like India. Rather, what he was suggesting, in fact, he clarified it to Times of India, that it's not distribution of redistribution of land. What he was suggesting, if you go by planning commission details, it was published at the time, we have a huge chunk of wastelands. This is what he mentions. The huge chunk of wastelands and huge chunk of unclaimed lands, and then huge chunk of forest lands. So Ambedkar was demanding distribution of those lands which were unclaimed by any party. Okay, so you see, that's reason Ambedkar was not advocating for any kind of rural revolution. Rather, he was only saying, in a typical Fabian fashion, we don't need any revolution. Rather, we need only policy realignment. Okay. So there, it doesn't come to the question that you have to take away land from others and then redistribute. Rather, what Ambedkar permanent separate settlement was suggesting, whatever lands available in the rural areas, new areas, and those lands should be taken out by the government and then distribute those lands to untouchable communities. This is what Ambedkar was visualizing. So therefore, the classical rural system, he was not trying to attack that. He was attacking that classical system from the perspective of the caste inequalities. He was dismantling it and he was critiquing it. But other than that, he was not suggesting that we have to take away the lands and redistribute them. Again, a mistake in that one. Huh? I hope it is very clear.
Yeah, Miss. Thank you, sir. Dr. Kiran Kumra, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
I think, congratulations. Very nice question. I would like to ask you two questions. My first question is, Ambedkar had said, Indian villages are origins of local narrow-mindedness and communalism. The biggest incident of 2006 is the Khair Lanchi Maharashtra. Incident in the family was completely killed and they did not even get justice. What would you like to say on this? And second, the 73rd Amendment 1992 was introduced and implemented to give constitutional status to the Panchayati Raj in India and strengthen the local self-governance by adding and the 11th schedule to the constitution. What is your opinion on it? That is my two questions. Thank you.
So, Kiran, you are not really audible clearly. Anyway, I got something from your.
Can I repeat again?
Your voice was breaking, but I think sufficient. You can
Okay, sir.
understand what you are trying to ask. one thing you said, Ambedkar consistently make his points very clear that villages are abode of superstitions, localism, caste prejudice. That's absolutely right. In fact, there is no point of relocating Ambedkar from that. Ambedkar consistently attacked village as a space. In fact, Ambedkar also clearly mentions that villages where there is no chance for development of human mind as well as material conditions. But at the same time, what I am suggesting, Ambedkar did not discard village. This is what I have to say that. See, you don't like, it doesn't mean you annihilate it. What I was suggesting in this presentation that despite Ambedkar's reservations about rural areas, and we have to see his ideas about rural Indias in a specific context. Okay. For example, in post 1930s, when he confronted with Mahatma Gandhi for Pune Pact, and then Ambedkar becomes highly critical of Gandhi. So therefore, when Gandhi was advocating village Swaraj, Ambedkar was countering it. You have to understand that. So his a polemics and then his a dislike should be understood with reference to larger political historical context in which one individual is operating. This is called, historical textual understanding, isn't it? So therefore, Kiran, we can't, take one particular sentence and then generalize this is attitude of one particular individual. This is what I'm saying. Existing literature has some problem. We have to accept that. And then when you are drawing certain ideas from individual, you should also see how those ideas an immediate context. You should also see that. Okay. So therefore, Ambedkar disliked village as a space, but at the same time, Ambedkar was also equally aware we don't have any other option. We don't have any mantra. We don't have any kind of miracle where we can shift overnight all the untouchable communities from rural to urban centers. So when you don't have miracle, you have to deal with the existing conditions. Okay. So Ambedkar ideas on village should be seen from this perspective. He was not idealizing village as a ideal life. And he was not, romanticizing like Gandhi. Village should be there. Rather, his ideas on village are pragmatic and coming from certain necessary conditions. So therefore, I'm not suggesting here, Kiran, listen to me. I'm not suggesting here Ambedkar idealized rural life. He maintained very consistent dislike for rural life. There is no doubt about it. But at the same time, he also has a certain program for rural areas. Ultimately, what he was, perhaps he must be thinking, once untouchable communities develop in the rural area itself, once their material conditions are to be improved, there will be kind of rippling effect, a big push can be given to these untouchable communities. That's, I think, my first answer to you. Second is, the Panchayat, what you say, 73rd Amendment, again, this is something Ambedkar was visualizing in 1940s, that rural democracy is more important. Rural democracy should be, it should take place at some point of time. But then when rural democracy to be implemented, and people who participate in rural democracy should also develop their vision. This is what I was referring to, Independent Labour Party Constitution. If you listen to my lecture, so Ambedkar was, in 1935 itself, he was, visualizing villagers should be given not only education but also rational, proper thinking. That rational, argumentative, and then that attitude should only come not as a miracle. It should be cultivated with establishment of libraries, establishment of many, many other things. Okay, these are all, contemplated by Dr. Ambedkar. Okay, so Dr. Kiran, I hope I answered you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else want to ask a question? This might be the last question. Yeah. Actually, no one is there, but I want to ask a question. But while answering, Kiran ma'am, I get my answer. I was talking about the rural modernization, the term you used. So, how Dr. Ambedkar was thinking about the rural modernization. But while answering Kiran ma'am, you only said modernizing the thoughts and also putting libraries to the village. Then I understand. Or is there anything more about the rural modernization? So I'll like to hear from you. Apart from that.
Yeah, rural modernization as a concept refers to three important principles, Akash. Principle number 2, there is something called agrarian egalitarianism. Agrarian egalitarianism refers to village as a vital social unit. It must have certain level of egalitarian, which means that rural resources should be distributed among. That's called agrarian egalitarianism. Ambedkar was consistently formulating his ideas on agrarian egalitarianism. Secondly, there's something called agrarian republicanism. Agrarian republicanism refers to participation of rural people into decision-making process, what Dr. Kiran has asked. And then agrarian republicanism, Ambedkar believed, is not possible without education and without the modern outlook and without argumentative capabilities and without, some kind of confidence. That is called, Ambedkar uses the word manhood. Manhood means not necessarily, it's not that women say, manhood means humanhood. So for Ambedkar, humanhood or manhood is nothing but material, mental, social, cultural, and comprehensive development of one individual. Okay. Now that comprehensive individual development for Ambedkar is something called rural modernization.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? I think no one. So now I move for a vote of thanks. So I request Sashikant Sambodhi to please give vote of thanks.
Thank you. On behalf of KIDK, I warmly thank Professor Dr. L. Karunyakara sir, a respected Dalit historian and Ambedkar thinker, for kindly chairing today's session. We are also deeply thankful to Professor V.M. Ravi Kumar sir, Department of History, BBA, Lucknow, for his very inspiring and thought-provoking lecture on Ambedkar and Villages, a theoretical reflections. Our sincere thanks to all the participants and attendees of the 32nd online lecture in the KIDK lecture series. Special thanks to our coordinators, Dr. Sukasni Thorat, Dr. Dasna Mishram, Dr. Smita Bhagat, Mr. Akash Khobragade, Mr. Shreyat Baud, Ms. Suhas Kamlakar, and Mr. Vijay Kumbre for their continuous efforts and support in making this session successful. This lecture series started on Ambedkar Jayanti 2025 continues to spread knowledge and new ideas in the field of Dalit study. Thank you once again to everyone for your valuable participation. And before we close, please don't forget to subscribe to the Dalit Knowledge YouTube channel. Here, this recorded session will be uploaded soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye. Take care to all. We will meet on next Saturday.